the path that we took to build 10 Data was completely unique. I guarantee you no one has taken a similar path. So let me explain. When I joined Sandy and Joel, who actually founded 10 Data right out of college in 2004, and they had 3 customers at the time, and they had been working on this for 4 years. But the customers were Morgan Stanley, UBS, and the New York Stock Exchange. So after seeing a demo of the software from Joel and thinking about those names and getting some understanding from him about just how special their proprietary database technology was for the time, I was like, wow, like we're going to, the digitization of everything is going to be an accelerating theme over the next decade. If this technology is really as special as it looks to be, and Joel says it is, this could be enormous and the applications could be enormous. I knew that just out of college, right? I didn't know anything else about sales or marketing or just what I learned, right? So I joined them, and it was kind of funny because they were like, well, what are you going to do for us? You're just like a kid out of college. And I was like, well, I don't know. I'll make some stuff happen. And so I just started basically doing everything that was not programming. The main focus area early on was using data and with our software in the mortgage-backed securities space, initially around agency-backed mortgage-backed securities to kind of analyze prepayment rates. Quickly, customers started asking us to get information about non-agency mortgages, because if you think back, this was 2004, 2005, 2006, like leading up to the subprime crisis. The market was incredibly hot. And so we were able to build a partnership and secure some data for every loan and how it paid through time. So you could do like loss severity analysis, delinquency analysis, prepayment, to the extent there were any prepayments. And one theme kind of became apparent to me across both data sets, and that was that all of our customers were using these third-party data sets on our software. We're also needing to load on their own all these other data sets that were relevant, that needed to be merged in with these like core data sets to do their analysis. So I basically had this idea at the time, like, why don't we build like a little data ecosystem and go out and build partnerships with these data providers and have all of the data sets preloaded in our software so that they could just not reinvent the wheel, each one of them, and make their job a whole lot easier. And so that's what I did. Like, we built relationships with like CoreLogic and Equifax and Experian and TransUnion and S&P, et cetera, right down the line. So whether it was the initial loan data or housing price appreciation information or swap rates or, you name it, we had it on our platform right there, ready to use. And anytime an investor wanted to sign up, we flipped a switch for the data sets they signed up for. So it was a very scalable model in that respect. The business was primarily backed by this proprietary software we had built. It was database technology. And it turns out that the database technology was unbelievably good for analyzing any kind of time series data. So we started to look at other areas that were highly time series analysis dependent. And the initial one that came up were like retail and consumer packaged goods. And so we started marketing and selling to them, and we started signing up large retailers and consumer brands like Procter and Gamble and Rite Aid and Dollar General and firms like that, mostly, fast moving good type businesses. And they were primarily using their own data on our platform. But in 2010, like really early in the alternative data game, we decided that we were going to go out and try to source more data sets from companies that create, big data exhaust, so to speak. And we were going to help them productize that data. There wasn't like a lot of best practices around this at the time. So Steve and I just basically went out and started talking to firms, trying to source interesting data, evaluating the data. Not all the data is really relevant, and some data sets can be relevant to one type of company and others another. So we looked at, for example, survey data early and couldn't really find enough correlation to make it actionable at the time, right? But then we moved on to credit card data, and I think even to this day, it's probably the most correlated and most actionable data set that there is. And again, we started to monetize these data sets with our partners into Wall Street, because the investors are usually just the earliest adopters of the stuff. They have deep pockets for things that actually matter. But as you can imagine, that data specifically is very, very valuable to retailers and brands as well, if they want to see what kind of share of wallet they're getting, what their customers are doing, things like that. So the nice thing that brought us together initially between financial services and retail and consumer goods was this time series database. But then we built this whole other business with Intent Data around alternative data that was just another product set that we could just upsell, cross-sell into these firms and make us even more valuable to them. That was really our path. We didn't really, we had other clients, but we didn't really expand too much outside of financial services, retail, and CPG. That was kind of our core there.
Wow. What a cool story. I've got so many questions, but I want to first talk about how you rose to being the president of the firm from a kid out of college.
Yeah. So to back up, by around 2000, within 2 years, I was doing stuff all along, but then I ended up getting myself in a position where I was able to really manage the overall sales and marketing for the mortgage-backed securities related business, which was basically our whole business, minus, the New York Stock Exchange or whatever. And I was able to figure out how to, I think, double the business 2 years in a row. So it gave people a lot of confidence that I knew what I was doing. Although, to be fair, I was still a kid and learning on the job and trying to just not make the same mistake twice. So I did that. And then I basically, when we started to expand, I took over just running all of sales and marketing for the company. It was weird, to be honest, Sandy, Joel, and I ran this company like a triumvirate, so to speak, the whole time. But I mostly spent my time on the forward facing parts of the business, sales, marketing, partnerships. Our CFO reported to me. It was kind of a hodgepodge. And then the way I became president was just that when we had been doing really well for a couple of years and we wanted to explore strategic possibilities and opportunities. And everyone was the board was well, who's going to run that process? And everyone was well, Greg has to do that because he's the only one who can sell anything out of all of us. So that's how I became president and got to run the process to sell the company in 2014 or 15. Finally closed in 15. But it wasn't really besides running the process, it wasn't that much of a change in responsibility because I was already, the three of us were already doing everything together. And then we sold the company, and a couple years after that, I became the CEO as well. But again, not so much change because we were of the way we had been running the company. Although at that point, the founders were certainly stepping back a lot more. So that's how that happened.
I want to talk about the stuff after the exit and how the exit happened. But first, what's showing up here is, okay, there's not much work history to chart this course of Greg Munves, who's able to meet two founders, join the company, have them trust him, and show up with confidence, which is what is required, not just to be an entrepreneur and take risk, but also to be client facing.
Mhm.
So we need to back up a little bit into where that confidence came from. And that might turn this into a short therapy session, but probably in a positive way. What is it from either your formative years as a kid or from college or high school or anything that gave you that confidence to run with this, and also the security that this was likely to be a failure and that would be totally okay if it was?
All right, well, let me start from the end and work back there. So,
Yeah.
so basically, the security was just that. Well, initially, as you and I have discussed in the past, like I was always interested in investing. So I was like kid from New York. I'd just go work on Wall Street. But the security blanket to me was always just that like Wall Street's not going to go anywhere. And so if I want to go do something on Wall Street, it will be there and I will figure out how to do that next if it doesn't work out. So that was kind of like always what I had in the back of my mind. Um, in terms of self-confidence, I think that like I've met people in life who are just naturally able to sell things and convince people and see value in things and communicate that value to others. And I've always been like that. So like from a very early age, I was always, if there were raffles to be sold for school, like I would sell the most raffles, right? Like that was, and I'm a highly competitive person. So, you know, whenever things like that happened, I always wanted to win. And so I think that gave me enough chutzpah to be in the room with senior people at large bulge bracket banks and hedge funds at a very early age, talking about highly technical subjects where I didn't know the details at the level required, but to have the willingness to kind of say like, look, we're a software company, because that's how we viewed ourselves at the time. And if you explain to me what you need to do, I think I'm smart enough to help you figure out how to get it done. But don't expect that I'm going to know everything about every kind of mortgage-backed security. Like that's just not happening for me at this moment in time. And so I think people just kind of responded well to that. Like people don't like when you BS them. And I didn't BS them. I just basically said, I don't know. And, but this is what I do know. And this is how I think we can help you. And it seemed to be effective. And, like, to be fair, like I, like so many other people, just also were kind of in the right place at the right time and had my fair share of luck.
I love that. You clearly then built an organization that was able to be successful, not in spite of itself, but because of the processes that the three of you put in place. And if you were the outward facing person, I imagine that you also spent a lot of time with recruiting and spending time with employees and engendering them into the organization. And you learned basically management. I don't know if did you study management in college?
Economics.
Okay.
So, I might have had a course or whatever, but it wasn't.
Yeah, right. So you learned management and really made it up as you went. What were some of the things that, looking back, that you did that really worked well to instill this culture of data and of camaraderie and winning together in an organization?
I think early on, and certainly before we sold the company, like we worked very hard to make it feel like it was almost like a family. We always made sure we did the right thing by people. We really cared about our employees. We socialized with our employees. People would come over. I mean, I was very young at the time. I wasn't married and have kids. This was like easy to get done. I'd have people over, right? Like we'd go out, like, and I made the effort to really know them, not just to know them in a business context. And I think that goes a long way in terms of building social capital with people. Obviously, very hard to do in the COVID world, but I think social capital is extremely valuable and can't be understated. I also think, though, we were very demanding. And we were demanding in our pursuit of like the truth and the facts, and being a company that helped companies use data. I think that's really important. Like being fact-based, knowing what's real and what's not real. You can always, in data, you can get tricked by data all the time, right? Like, and so these are these are values or tenets that I think a company in the data space has to live by,
For sure.
in order for people to really buy into it. And I think if you don't do that, like you will go down a product, you will build product roadmaps, or you have a problem. There's a probability you build product roadmaps that just don't make sense.
That's very, very true.
We
Well,
did other things, right? Like we also like always tried to talk to customers. We did all like the normal stuff too, like always talk to customers before you build the products and things like that. But
yeah, I love what you said about getting to know people on a personal level, not just in the business context. And yeah, I agreed. It is hard to do during COVID. It's part of why
you can't fake caring about people.
No.
You know, you just either have to do it or you don't do it, right? Like,
right. Well, that's part of why I do things like this, is so that we can get to know each other better through our stories, and also share them with others that are building businesses, whether built around valuable data or not. So getting to the exit, and then I want to talk about the future. So the exit, what's the exit story? How did that come about? Was it opportunistic? Was it running a process? Was it a combination?
We had been doing well for a few years, and so we had been pretty consistently approached by people trying to learn more. And we'd been doing some demos and conversations with investors and potential acquirers and things like that. I would call it lightly, but we knew that there was interest. And so once the board decided, like, yeah, let's go check out our strategic opportunities are out there, what are out there for us, we decided that we would run a process. And so we interviewed bankers, we interviewed lawyers, and we got going, and we spoke to everyone out there, and ultimately we felt like Advance, who we had spoken to before the acquisition, would be a really good home for the company. They're a family-based business. We're not a family-based business, but we're trying to have like a family-based culture.
Yeah.
And so, the culture seemed right, the fit, so to speak, and the price was right. And, we got it done. We got a pretty clean deal done relatively quickly, maybe sort of average quickly, but it worked out. It worked out well.
Well, so Advance owns Condé Nast and a few other businesses, and you went to work there and then became CEO of 1010. Was it run independently and without talking specifically about Advance? Because I think that's not really the question. Is what's it like to be an entrepreneur and then go work inside of a large organization, as CEO of a business line for a number of years, and how did you survive?
Yeah, well, first of all, when we sold the company to them, part of the deal was that I would stay, and I gave them my word that I would, and my word is my bond. So I did, and from that point forward, I didn't really think about it that way, right? Like I thought it like, hey, I said I would do something, and I'm going to try my hardest to do it the best I can. And so that's that. I mean, we got a lot of benefit over time from the organization in terms of like professional services and things like that, that were certainly helpful. And obviously in my position, I had the opportunity to, they're in the market looking at other companies. I had an opportunity to help them diligence other companies and talk about potential strategic directions and things like that, which was interesting. And over time, get to sit with and share and learn from other CEOs in the portfolio as well. Ultimately, 95% of my time was just running Tenda Data independently with them, on the board.
Right. So not too different. The last question, because I know we're short on time. Alternative data, first and foremost, I don't even know when that was coined, but it was likely while you were running the business, and you probably started selling data to Wall Street before, which is amazing. My view on alternative data is that every company now will be a customer of alternative data, not just financial firms. And however, by selling data to financial firms, you basically get to see the future, because the future of other industries is what those firms are adopting, now, and then, the future is every other firm adopts that in 3 to 5 years. That's been my experience, and likely yours. What does the future hold?
It's complicated because when we started this, I think it was way more like wild, wild west with data. And now you're seeing a lot more, I think for the better, right? But you're seeing a lot more concern around, curating data sets with privacy compliance, security, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be, the biggest theme I think you're gonna just see is opt-in, like opt-in everything, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I really do think, like, look, it depends how you do it, but I do think consumers generally are willing to trade information about their behaviors for services. And so as long as the bargain is that that's a fair trade or a fair bargain, right, between them, I think data companies will be able to stay on the right side of the regulatory,
Yeah.
I think you'll see a future where people can feel really, really good about using these data sets ethically and morally. And I think as a result, not only will the types of alternative data that exist today be more ubiquitous, I think you will also start to see more information in spaces that traditionally probably felt a little bit more off limits, like healthcare and things like that. I mean, just think about like where the world is going in biotechnology, right? Like companies are gonna have unbelievable information around what people like, genetics and biomarkers and things like that. Like if it's done the right way and it's protected in the right way, I think it will certainly help investors and those companies not misallocate money. Another area that I think is just going to be big is like using data to figure out product development generally. So you can imagine like consumer brands as well, whether they're in the fashion space or electronic space or whatever, starting to figure out what consumer preference will be based on, trending behaviors and things like that. And I think that you get that done by creating really transparent processes around, data exchange, right? Like people providing their data to companies to use in exchange for some benefit, monetary or otherwise.
Yep, I agree. I think the first step is in educating people on what their data actually is, because a lot of people talk about data and don't touch my data, and it's like, well, can we touch the fact that you are using these buttons on your phone in this way, and and anonymizing it, because that would be very helpful to us understanding how to make a better phone.
Right. And then people, you do that? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Like the idea of share your data is a very scary term to people. It needs to be, this is specifically what we're looking for, is every time you click the right button on the mouse, we want to know that it's the right button versus the left button, so that we can make sure that our mice picks up your finger touch. Okay, cool. Like, anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
I know you got to hop. This has been awesome, man. Thank you so much.